Christ is risen, indeed he is risen. Beloved brothers and sisters in Christ, I greet you on this great day, the bright Wednesday, Pascha Wednesday. All of this week is Pascha. And for 40 days we celebrate the Lord's resurrection now. And I'm getting ready right now to go to church to celebrate the feast of St. George, the great martyr, the wonder worker, and the trophy bearer. And I wanted to send this message to you guys before I go to church. First of all, happy feast day, happy names day to all the Georges, the Giorgios, Georgettes, Georginas, Yorgo, so on and so forth in our parish and in all the world. Saint George. Lots of people are called George because of Saint George. It feels like every other church in our culture or tradition is for Saint George, and that's great because Saint George is a great saint, and he deserves that. Obviously, one of the best stories that we read in the ideology literature, the lives of the saints. However, I have a feeling that there is like a wrong perception about Saint George and why Saint George is that great. I have a feeling that people do it for the wrong reasons, not with the wrong intentions, but for the wrong reasons. You see in his icon, we see Saint George with a sword, and he looks as a soldier because he was a soldier, and he's killing the dragon with his sword. And lots of our people pray for Saint George because he's so powerful, just like Saint Elias. We have these wrong perceptions, but I have the feeling that Saint George is venerated in the Orthodox Church that much for kind of like the opposite reasons of what people think, right? And we see this in his life, and this reminded me of a great verse from the second epistle of Saint Paul to the Corinthians that says, "My power is made manifest in weakness, or made perfect. My power is made perfect in weakness." And I think that this speaks to the life of St. George. St. George was a young man, and he was a Christian. His family was a Christian family in Cappadocia. His father died. He was a martyr, his father. And then his mother moved to Palestine, and he served in the army. He was a very strong, courageous soldier. And at some point, the emperor makes a decision, Diocletianus, he makes a decision to openly persecute Christians, like to openly allow the persecution of Christians. And this is when St. George kind of dropped his weapon and his attire and went to the palace, let's say, and spoke with the representatives of the emperor and said, "I cannot do that. This is unfair. This is not what soldiers do." So basically, he stood up for injustice. And then I don't need to narrate all the details of his life. I do encourage you, however, to go and read them. He goes through a series of one of the worst persecutions and sufferings that you could ever imagine. The wheel, and being buried, kind of alive in lime, and being tortured, and in many different ways. And the Lord allowed that he doesn't actually die from these tortures. Not because he wouldn't die physically. Eventually he does die. He's a martyr, right? However, because when people saw that he wasn't dying and that the Lord was with him, thousands and thousands believed in Christ. So the message came out, and people believed when he was in the weakness, when he was persecuted, right? And even the most famous story about him and killing the dragon, most sources speak about this as a miracle that happened after his death, right? And it was in some sources in a place in Mount Lebanon where there was this dragon or this sea animal. Whether this has become extinct through history, we don't know, but it represents Satan, because the dragon and the snake, and that kills people, right? And then this city was pagan mostly, and then the governor of this city, or the ruler, decided to offer one person every period of time, maybe a year, to this dragon to eat. And they drew lots for this. And he said, even if the turn came for my daughter, I will offer my daughter to be a sacrifice eaten by this dragon. And actually this happens. The turn came for his daughter, and he did offer his daughter. And while his daughter was at the shore waiting for the dragon from the sea or the lake, this animal to eat her, offered as a sacrifice, Saint George, she sees Saint George coming on his horse, and he kills the dragon from the throat, and he tells her, uh, uh, drag the dragon. He doesn't kill him, but he kind of injure him, and he tells her, drag him into the city and show this animal to the people. And then the people were afraid first. Then she explained, so they slew him, and then they believed, and they went and worshipped in a church that Christians had dedicated for Saint George and the Mother of God. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that Saint George didn't kill. He actually stood up for injustice. What he did in this miracle, he actually saved an innocent life. That's what he did. And then he brought people to Christ, not through power, but when he was persecuted. So this is where I think that we need to kind of redirect a little bit why St. George is that important, and remember in martyrdom and how we offer witness to Christ that in weakness, the power of the Lord is made perfect and manifest in the best way. So we ought to remember these about the life of Saint George and all the martyrs and all the saints. Reading the lives of the saints is very important, and today we celebrate Saint George, and this reminds me of what we spoke about last week. Jesus Christ's peak appearance in the flesh was on the cross. Obviously, the cross and the resurrection are related, but on the cross, in the weakness, we saw him as God. His power was manifest through his weakness, and thus the saints, and thus we too, in weakness, we reflect the power of Christ if we see Christ in this weakness and give him praise and glory and witness to him. This is what St. George did. I hope this helps kind of steer a little bit the misperceptions in our culture about St. George, this great saint that offered his life for Christ. I wish you all a blessed feast day, and Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen.